Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First, let me express my gratitude for having been invited by all of you. I was greeted so wonderfully by the students when I arrived. That was very heartwarming. The welcome you've given me this morning is also very heartwarming. I appreciate it. But I think what it does show, is that this whole area of electoral reform is something that is very close to all of our hearts. Certainly since the 13th general elections is nearly upon us. Just two small corrections, and it's not your fault, but I'm no more the co-chair of the Orang Asli Committee of the Bar Council, nor am I on the Women's Aid Organisation EXCO. I've just given all that up. I hope to go back to it after Bersih 2.0, but those have been my areas of interest: empowerment of women as well as empowerment of the Orang Asli community. And honestly, those issues also arise when you talk about free and fair elections, and I'll come to that as I go through my presentation. Now, why do we have free and fair elections, or why are free and fair elections important? It seems to be an obvious answer, because it's a question of fair play. And I think if you drew the analogy with a football match, since Malaysians are crazy about football, I don't know a lot about it, but let's say it's a match between Man United and Liverpool, perhaps. What you want to see is an even playing field. You don't want to see a playing field that is lopsided. You don't want to see one side having a larger goal than the other side. And most important of all, you don't want the referee to be unfair. I can bet your bottom dollar that if there was any unfairness on the part of the referee, and I've seen this many times on Twitter because I'm on Twitter, everyone comes out slamming the referee. So the referee is really important. The playing field is really important. And that's what we're fighting for in free and fair elections. We want an even playing field for everyone. But let me talk about the referee for a minute. The referee here is the election management body, that is the Suruhanjaya Pilihan Raya, which is SPR, or the Election Commission, the EC. Now, in the problem that the EC is facing now, more than previously, is that since 2008, Malaysians have actually woken up to the fact that their vote means something, that their vote can actually bring change. For many years before that, there was an almost acceptance over a long period of time that one party is going to win for sure, one party is going to win with 2/3. But to the credit of Malaysians, they still went out and voted. Our voter turnout is more than 70%, about 75 to 78%, which is really very, very good compared to many other countries. But the result always went one way. For the first time in the year 2008, we woke up to a new Malaysia in March, on the 8th of March 2008. A Malaysia where voters actually made a choice that the ruling party should be deprived of their 2/3 majority. That is a big step for Malaysians. And I think many people were surprised at the result, including the opposition, by the way, because in some parts of the country, they put up candidates who leave a lot to be desired, if I may say, because they didn't really expect to win. When I asked them, look, why this person or why that person, they said, well, actually, we never expected to win. So that has changed the whole scenario, the whole political scenario. And for the first time, people were becoming aware about what it is we want for Malaysia. I think there are many reasons why Malaysians want change. There are issues of corruption, issues of abuse of power, issues that relate to so many facets of our life. But I think corruption really is one of the biggest issues because it pervades everything. It infects everything. And I think Malaysians are beginning to say, look, enough is enough, we want change. So, what has happened since the year 2008? Don't forget, there was a Bersih in 2007. I had nothing to do with that first Bersih, as it were. There was a rally for free and fair elections. Actually, I wasn't even there. But what they did do, and this was led by political parties, by the opposition political parties and NGOs. And what they did do, the positive thing that came out of that, was that there was a greater awareness about free and fair elections. Before that, people never really bothered about it. They just assumed it was going to run, you can cast your vote, and that's it. But since then, there has been a growing awareness about electoral reform, and particularly since Bersih 2.0, our rally in July 2011, people have become more and more aware of their rights as voters. Now, let me just read for you something that Kofi Annan said, the former Secretary General of the United Nations. He now heads an organization, a commission, which is called the Global Commission on Elections, Democracy and Security. And the law students or anyone who's interested should go and look it up, because they've issued a report dated September 2012. And it's very interesting because there's a whole group of very learned people, which includes Madeleine Albright, it includes Professor Amartya Sen, and several others who sat down and studied the world systems, electoral systems, and they came up with proposals on how elections can be made freer and fairer around the world. And this is what Mr. Kofi Annan says in his foreword, and bear with me because I think it's important I read all of it. This is a part of his foreword. He says, elections are the indispensable root of democracy. They are now almost universal. Almost universal, so not everyone has this, okay? Since 2000, all but 11 countries have held national elections. But to be credible, we need to see high standards before, during, and after votes are cast. Opposition organizations must be free to organize and campaign without fear. There must be a level playing field among candidates. On polling day, voters must feel safe and trust the secrecy and integrity of the ballot. And when the votes have been counted, the result must be accepted no matter how disappointed the defeated candidates feel. When the electorate believes that elections have been free and fair, they can be a powerful catalyst for better governance, greater security, and human development. But in the absence of credible elections, citizens have no recourse to peaceful political change. The risk of conflict increases, while corruption, intimidation, and fraud go unchecked, rotting the entire political system slowly from within. So if you do not have clean and fair elections, you run the risk of conflict, of increased corruption, and of course the rotting of the whole political system. So when you need to answer the question why you need free and fair elections, the better question to ask is, what if you don't have free and fair elections? And we need to understand that what we're fighting for when we fight for clean and fair elections is for the entire system in the country, the integrity of the entire system in the country, because it's a slippery slope. Once you do not have free and fair elections, everything slides. Now, what Mr. Kofi Annan did was, with his committee, with the commission, they looked at several countries. And he looked at Kenya, for example, and he said, what a pity we could not intervene before Kenya fell into conflict over the elections. It's a pity people didn't do enough before the elections to save the situation after the elections. And that's why Bersih feels that the steps to clean up have to happen now, before the elections. Now let's talk about our election management body for a minute. Under the Federal Constitution, and I have my own little copy, I carry it around, it's very useful. Everything is there actually about the elections. Everything, all the guidelines are in the Federal Constitution. And under Article 113, is it 113 or, sorry, 113 is conduct of elections, 114. And let me read it to you because it's important. It says, in appointing members of the Election Commission, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong shall have regard to the importance of securing an election commission which enjoys public confidence. Now people forget those words. Public confidence. What does that mean? That means when you look at the election commission, you have to feel comfortable, confident that they are going to run these elections with a no-nonsense approach, that they have integrity, that there'll be no cheating, and they will brook no nonsense from any parties, doesn't matter who, that they will insist that the rules are followed. Now, this is our opinion. I don't mean to influence you. You need to make your own judgment. In our opinion, Bersih's opinion, the EC in this country has failed to maintain its independent stance. Thank you. Maybe it's many, many years of doing the same thing over and over again, and in a sense, getting away with it. Let me tell you why the opposition starts with a disadvantage. I know you don't want, this is not political. Unfortunately, elections are political. So I need to say a few things. You can disagree with me, that's fine. Please stand up and disagree with me. But this is from our research. These are from facts. Several areas, several books, several reports. Several reports actually. If you follow the Merak report, by the way, which is a group set up by Dr. Ong Kian Meng, you will find a lot of the evidence in relation to the electoral roll, for instance. All the discrepancies in the electoral roll, they have done a massive research on it. So that's one area. There are also court cases, by the way. If you're interested, maybe you should see me later if you want to know where you get all the information. We also know that constituency redelineation, don't believe me, go and do your own research. The way constituencies are drawn, that's why I say they start at a disadvantage, because the constituencies are already drawn. And what we have found is that it is lopsided amongst a lot of the constituencies. Now, under the Federal Constitution, you actually have guidelines. Many people don't realize this, but there are guidelines under the Federal Constitution on how you draw up constituencies. And the aim is to tend towards equality. It's not possible in every case because some areas are rural areas, some areas are city areas. It's not possible in every instance, I accept that. There will be differences because of the geography of the nation. But it shouldn't be hugely and vastly different. That's what we have found. There are certain constituencies that have 150,000 voters, for example. Certain constituencies will have much less than that. So let me give you an example. This is an example. Constituency X, for example, has 150,000 people. Constituency Y has got 50,000 people. Now, what does that tell you? That means, and this all relates to the value of our vote. The value of the vote in the 150,000 constituency is 1/3 that of the 50,000 constituency. Do you get that? which means your value counts more in the 50,000 constituency than it does in the 150,000 constituency. So the effect of constituencies that are not drawn equally is that it devalues the sum of our votes, which is not supposed to be the case. The idea of the guidelines in the federal constitution is that it must more or less be same. It cannot be the same, more or less similar, but not so dissimilar. So that's one of the areas. And I think the government does recognize that, that the constitutional redelineation, something has to be done about that. In fact, that exercise could have been done in 2011. The last exercise took place in the year 2003. They have 8 to 11 years. After 8 to and before 11 years, they have to finish the next exercise. So that exercise could have been done in the year 2011. But of course, everyone thought the elections were going to be called. So that is one area in which we think there is an uneven playing field. It's an important area. The second, of course, second example. I'm only going to give you a few examples. The second is in relation to the media. Free and fair access to the media. Now, that is one of the demands of Bersih, as you know, and it is the easiest demand to fulfill because actually it just takes a phone call because it's a policy decision. But unfortunately, the mainstream media and the government organs do not allow for free and fair access to media. And that is one of the things that we're fighting for. Because if you want an even playing field, you need to have access. All parties have to have access to a free and fair media. Now, in a vibrant democracy, that's what you will see. But of course, we now have the growth of the internet and the online media, which has helped to mitigate some of the unfairness of the lack of access to the mainstream media. But it's not enough, because mainstream media's reach is far wider than the online media. So the young lady disagrees. You can ask me a question later. I may have a question for you. Okay, if that is so, why are they reluctant to allow free access to it? That's my question. That is my question. If they say, oh, not much reach, nothing there, then allow everyone access, free and fair access.
Dr. Venturesmaker,
yes.
A housekeeping rule. Dato Ambiga has told me that she will accept questions after the talk. So I think what I would like to do is, as a measure of the management of this talk, Dato Ambiga finishes what she has to say, open the questions to the House. Is that satisfactory?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dato.
So, free and fair access to the media is a huge part of the process. Now, the other thing would be, of course, I'm not going to go into the details of the electoral roll because that's a slightly complex area, but we do feel that the electoral roll requires cleaning up. And I will leave it at that, and I'll leave it to you to ask me questions on that if you're concerned. But going into the next general elections, that actually is one of our biggest concerns. Because there have been so many reports of discrepancies that have come up, but unfortunately, they have not all been addressed satisfactorily. You should also ask me about the RCI in Sabah. But these are the things that are of great concern to Bersih as we go into the 13th general elections. And one of the ways in which we have sought to address these concerns is to encourage a high voter turnout to the voters. So what we're saying is, although you did well, 75% coming out, please push it to 85 or 90%. Because that is one way in which we can mitigate these discrepancies on the roll. You outflank them or you outnumber them, basically. That's the aim of our project called JOM 100, where we have said we would like 100% voter turnout for the next general elections. And I think that's important anyway, because it's important for each one of us to take part in the democratic process. And I believe a large percentage of people actually are the youth who have just joined the ranks of the 21-year-olds and who are interested in what's happening in the country, and they could well form the bulk of the new voters in the upcoming general elections, and they probably have a huge say in what's going to happen. And that's very interesting for me, because not all, of course, youth are interested in the electoral process, but many are. And the fact that you've invited me here, I assume all of you are interested in the electoral process. Now, can I hear? Thank you. All right. By a show of hands, are you all registered to vote? Yes. Yes. All right. Let me ask who hasn't registered to vote. Are you under 21? So all of you have registered to vote. Now, have you registered to vote? Under 21. Under 21. Well, you can't. But by the way, that's one of our aims long term. We want to reduce the age of registration to 18. That's one of our long term aims. It's not something we can achieve now because it needs a constitutional amendment. But one of the things we're looking forward to in the future is to reduce the age of registration. So look, all of you are registered, that's fantastic. But are you all going to vote? I assume yes. I assume yes. I think this will be one of the most hotly contested general elections in the history of the country. And that can only be good for the country. Contestation at elections is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with having a strong opposition. And every time you mention opposition, everybody goes, oh my goodness, it's political, don't say anything. Look, we better get used to this as the process in this country. You have to respect the government as much as you respect the opposition. You have to respect the opposition as much as you respect the ruling party. Why? They are our elected MPs. When you run down the opposition and think they are the enemy, what you're doing is you are insulting the voters who put them there. So we need to respect everybody's choice. And when you do that, and of course it takes a little bit getting used to. We're not used to such a strong opposition. We've had opposition before, but not such a strong opposition. But we will get used to it. It's a process. Our thinking will change. Our thought process will change. And that's what really, the bottom line, that's what Bersih is fighting for. We are fighting for a multi-party democracy. What you have in the UK, which is strong opposition, strong ruling party. And what happens when you do that? The Rakyat wins. The Rakyat wins. Things have changed in Malaysia. And I attribute it to a few things. One is the rise of civil society, which will include organizations like Bersih and Suara, etc., who are all bringing or raising issues that relate to human rights in general. So because they have a louder voice, or they actually assert their, in a sense, their opinions, that is something that has also now become part of Malaysian political culture. The second reason why things have changed, for the better, I would say, is that we have a strong opposition. It only did good. What happens when you have a strong opposition? Those in power have to defend their policies. They have to think about why they do things. They can't get away with just anything because they have 2/3 majority, they can push everything through. They actually have to debate their policies in parliament. Again, that's good for us. It cannot be bad. All the instances of corrupt practices that have been raised by the opposition, maybe not all were accurate, But those are the things that come out. So what's happening is, we, the people, are benefiting. We, the people, are getting more information. We, the people, are watching our leaders thrash it out between themselves. And then we can judge them. And we can judge whether they deserve to form the next government. So that whole process has taken time. And it will take time. And of course, the third most potent agent for change is the internet, is the online media, is the information that we're getting. Because previously, the information was controlled. So what you would know would be what perhaps the government or particular parties want you to know. Now, they don't have a monopoly over information. Now, information goes around. I don't deny that a lot of it is rubbish, but we are smart enough to know how to discern what is good information and what is bad. We're learning there as well. But the point is this. What that does is it empowers us. And that's what democracy is about. Not empowering our leaders. It's empowering ourselves so that we make the right choice in the elections. So what I see from between 2008 and now is an empowerment of the rakyat, the empowerment of the people. And they have also got over their fear factor. They're not afraid to express their views. They're not afraid. They have crossed that barrier of fear. They've crossed that. They're prepared to express their views, whether through the internet or in other ways. And they're prepared to hold our leaders to account. Never in the history of the country have our leaders been held to account. And I'm not saying just the ruling party. We must hold the opposition to account just as much. It applies to all. If they talk rubbish, we should say so. Because as far as I'm concerned, and that's why, of course, we are constantly being attacked and saying we're pro-opposition, I can tell you this much. Whoever wins in the next general elections, we will be just as tough with the respective parties. And whoever wins in the next general elections, things still have to change. It cannot be business as usual. Even if the Barisan comes back to power, they cannot do things the way they always used to. They will have to be, and I think they are attempting to, so is the opposition, they actually have to start listening to the people more. They need to hear us and hear what it is that is bothering us. We need to do something serious about corruption in this country. It has pervaded every aspect of our lives. And we don't deserve that as Malaysians. We don't deserve to live in a corrupt society. We deserve much, much better. So in the next general elections, my only advice to you is, you must vote. Please. It is so important that you go out and state your case via your vote. And what we have also set up, a campaign that we have launched, Bersih, is a campaign, of course, Jom 100 is one of them. The other campaign is called Pemantau, which is a campaign for citizen observers. Meaning, we are going to observe our elections, the people. Ordinary citizens are going to observe these elections, and this is how it works. Of course, we need about 10,000 people. We've only got close to 2,000, that's not enough, but we think the numbers will increase. We actually train people and tell them what they should look out for. And what we have is, these citizen observers will stand outside the polling station because we're not allowed inside, and they will just observe. From the time Parliament is dissolved until polling day, these observers will keep their eyes and ears open. We have the journalist group who will be keeping a watch on the media. And of course, we have our other citizen observers who will be looking at the processes. We give them training, what they should look out for, and so on and so forth. And the idea is this: we are going to pick hotspots because we can't cover all 222 areas because of the numbers. We're going to pick areas where we think the contestation is going to be the most, the most interesting, I suppose, for want of a better word. And that's where we will do our observation. And this is not new, by the way. It is internationally recognized that citizens can observe their own elections. It's just that it's the first time we're doing it. It's happened in Russia, Ukraine, and so on. It has happened. And the good thing about citizen observers is it has been found to actually reduce incidents of political violence and fraud. It has actually helped. It may not eliminate it completely, but it helps. And all we're doing is observing, and then we will write up a report after the elections. But what is important is that everyone knows that the Rakyat is watching. And I think, actually, to be honest, whether you are a citizen observer or not, I think the Rakyat are going to be really watching the next general elections, whether it's from home or from in front of the polling stations, wherever. Because everyone will want to ensure that these general elections are free and fair. Now, these are the initiatives of Bersih, and we hope that the Rakyat will join us in this initiative and that you will take part in the democratic process. I think it's going to be one of the most interesting elections. It can be one of the most interesting elections that we have ever faced. We hope that instances of political violence and dirty politics will stop. We also have a campaign about that. We also have a campaign condemning political violence of any sort, or violence of any sort, because that is a symptom of elections that are not clean and fair. Political violence is a symptom of elections that do not come up to the required standard. But that is something we, the Rakyat, must voice our condemnation for. We must also voice our condemnation for politics, for dirty politics. You know what I mean. Videotapes being an example, and so on and so forth. That type of politics. I mean, when I think of our forefathers, our Tunku, I wonder what he would feel if he saw the kind of politics that's playing itself out at the moment. I don't think he'd be very happy. And I don't think we should be very happy. I'm concerned that our children are watching us. The next generation is watching us. They're watching the way in which we're conducting ourselves right now. And I think our leaders better know that. All of them. They better know that what they do in the 13th general elections is going to set an example. They have to decide whether that example is going to be a good example or a bad example. Now, and then you have to make your decisions based on whether they are setting a good example or a bad example, whether the policies are good or bad, whether they are racist in the way they speak, whether there's sexism, by the way, for the women. Women should be very vigilant. Please vote out these sexist MPs that have been in our parliament, who have made comments that are really undesirable. By the way, they don't even realize they're being sexist. They think they're being funny. That's the tragedy of it. So, these are the things we need to be aware of. We need to be very clear in our mind what it is we want. What it is we want for the future of the country. Because the next general elections, in my view, is going to determine the future of this country is going to determine which path we follow. Change, don't be afraid of change. It's never easy. Change has already started, by the way. Already started from 2008. And you can see that there are growing pains, that it's not easy, that the mindsets have to change. But there are a lot of good people on both sides of the divide. A lot of them, because I follow them on Twitter and so on. I know that there are good people on both sides. And if there are enough good people all round, on both sides of the divide, as well as amongst the rakyat, the change can be a positive change. So don't ever be afraid of change, because that's the only way we can improve. But what I would say is that what you do in the 13th general elections is going to count. And don't think, oh, the candidate in my constituency will easily win, so I'm not going to bother going out. No, no, no. I think it's going to be close everywhere. Please assume it's going to be close everywhere, and that your vote may make the difference. So at the end of the day, as I say, what Bersih really wants is, that is our ultimate goal, the multi-party democracy. And we want full participation by the rakyat in that process of getting there, and even after that. And I think Malaysians are getting there. I can see it. And as I say, the internet has played its part in spreading this information. And it has actually encouraged some very interesting dialogue. So at the end of the day, we have to remember that a lot of the politicians, we may criticize them sitting in parliament, but we're the ones who put them there. So you're going to have to be very discerning about the candidates that you choose. Please attend the charamas. They are going to be interesting, I think. And don't be afraid to take part fully in this process. Because at the end of the day, it is it is in our hands what happens in the next general elections. Even if you have a few people who want to cause trouble, etc., if there are enough of us out there who reject that, we can stop it. So we should set the tone. That's what I'm trying to say. We, the rakyat, will have to set the tone for the next general elections. And the best way for us to do that is to take part in the 13th general elections. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Would you like to stand there?
I'm fine here.
Or would you like a chair? As I mentioned, Dato said that she would be willing to take a few questions. In fact, she said that she wanted to talk less and get more questions from the House. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to give me your names, raise your hands first, of course, tell me who you are, and then direct the question to Dato. For me, I must say, that it's been one of the most exciting presentations. I think the whole idea was for my colleagues and I who manage this place, that to bring back into educational institutions a sense of what is happening outside the world. And I think you've done that very well in so far as the elections are concerned. So thank you very much for that. So I will invite questions. Staff are also allowed to ask questions.
Hello, good morning, Mr. Menon.
Yes.
And Dato Ambiga. It's me again. Hi. Alright, my question is, hot question.
Yeah.
Sensasi. Alright. Okay, one of the criticism of Bersih...
I didn't get your name.
Okay, my name, you forgotten me?
I know, sorry.
I'm Rosita, by the way.
Yes. I couldn't make you out with your hairstyle.
Oh. Okay.
Rosita.
My question for Dato is, I'm sorry, I can't...
That's okay.
Quite difficult to stand here.
Doesn't matter.
Okay, my question for Dato is, Bersih 2.0 has drawn some criticism about your external funding. Okay, in your interview with Malaysia Kini in August, 2011, okay, when the journalist asked you, alright, you were saying that the funding came from rakyat's money. Remember, do you still remember the interview with Malaysia Kini? Yeah, it's in the internet, right? Okay, somehow you said that there are two funding from the NDI and OSI, right? Okay, that you have not touched the money, right? It's for something else. What something else is that? And have you touched any money from any external source?
Okay, at the point in time when I did the Malaysia Kini interview, we had not used, this was 90,000 in total from both of them. 90,000, a little bit over 90, maybe 94,000 in funds from both the organizations, 90,000 ringgit, not US, ringgit. And at that point, we had not used it, but we used it up. But it was meant specifically for a project about a redelineation. It was just project specific. Now those funds have been used only for that project. But as far from then, by the way, till now, we are entirely funded by the Malaysian public.
Thank you.
Entirely.
Okay, Rosina? Okay. Any other questions from, yes, Stephanie? Not very
Okay.
fast.
She's faster than me. About to put up already. Okay, my name is Stephanie. My question is specific on the election campaign. Now, much as you have been saying, encouraging each and everyone to go out, yes, we will. That is for sure. But the thing that we are not sure, and we are very doubtful, is that even though we get 100% turnout by the Malaysian citizen to the polling station to cast our vote, we will not be now being alerted on what are the possible fraud or cheat or the tricks to be played by the BN specifically. I would like to hit onto the nail so that everybody is fully aware of what are the tricks they are going to play that are not so obvious to our human eyes. So therefore, even though you may have observers, but observers can only observe and write the report after the election. So not much point. In that sense, the impact is not prior to the election. What we need to take precaution is prior to the election. That means I hope that Bersih will train us and teach us, educate people who tend to be very blah blah. Because even the educated ones, question one is that what are the possible tricks that they are going to play that is not obvious to us, that even we mark the vote for, let's say, an opposition, but it can turn out to be that it is in the ruling party, the BN, for example. Because I read something and I requested for certain kind of demonstration and illustration as clear as possible, particularly on those dots that are going to appear on the column which we may not know. So would you be able to teach us how to make a feel or detect that? And can we request for a change if, let's say, we detected certain kind of irregularities in the polling station? They may come and say that, no, we have already printed out all these forms for you already according to the registration rule. And you are not allowed to change. And there is also the issue of that they could have already predetermined which party. So how to address this problem?
I'm sorry, Stephanie, question. Yeah.
So how do you train us to detect?
All right, yeah, that's fine. Thank you. I'm happy with comments as well. Right, I sent Dinesh a whole load of slides, which you're welcome to look at. Because in our Pemantau training, we actually, I can't give you all the answers here because it takes a whole training session to actually train you on what to look out for. But as far as the marking of the ballot, let me tell you that. If it's a clean ballot and you mark your candidate, there's not much they can do with that. And I don't think there has been any interference after you mark the ballot, as far as I know. Okay? What you will find though, the problem you may find is markings on the ballot, what you said. You may actually find markings on the ballot. You have to immediately alert the clerk. When you collect the ballot, you need to alert the clerk straight away. Now the problem with the marking, let me tell you, is that EC has, if I'm not mistaken, more than 20 or 30 markings that they accept as a proper marking of the ballot. So I hope you all know it's a cross, huh? You got to mark a cross. But they have also accepted ticks, dots, that kind of thing. And it is in their guidebook. That's why I say I need a whole session to explain this to you, okay? It is in their guidebook. They accept actually other forms which truly represent the will of the voter. And at the polling stations, each of the parties has got their agents, polling agents. They are supposed to scrutinize as far as possible the process. It's not easy to scrutinize everything because of the distance that they sit away from the clerk. So there are many issues that you need to look out for. One of the things we're concerned about with the indelible ink, by the way, which has been allowed, which is one of the demands of Bersih that has been allowed, is that they are proposing to mark your finger before you collect your ballot. We have a problem with that because we're concerned that the ink may get onto the ballot paper and that could be a problem. So that's something you need to look out for. They're going to mark your left hand. Of course, I don't know what they're going to do about left-handers, but they're going to mark your left finger. Please take your ballot with your right hand and don't touch it with your other hand. And then you're going to have to mark it. It's supposed to dry, but I don't know how quickly. So anyway, those are the little things we're concerned about for the next general elections. But as far as cheating, as I say, please look at the slides. There are many ways in which cheating can go on. We have come across instances, particularly in Sarawak, of out-and-out bribing. Money, in other words, vote buying, clear-cut vote buying, which is where we need actually the MACC to act. We need our institutions to act. So there are many instances of that as well. There are instances where people are prevented from coming to vote. Groups, Orang Asli, in a particular instance in West Malaysia, were not allowed to come and vote. So there are little things like that that go on, you know. So that's where we can observe to some extent. I agree with you, we can't see everything, of course. But we can at least be there. And at least if people after voting come out and talk to us, we're not allowed to interfere with any voter. You cannot interfere with any voter. But if a voter comes out and gives us a report of something that is unusual, that's something that can go into our report. So what I would say to you is, as a voter, keep your eyes and ears open. Keep your eyes and ears open and be careful with your ballot paper. Be careful with your ballot paper. Because my concern is if you mark, cross, but there's another mark, a smudge, for example, in the other box, it'll be a spot vote. That's the problem. But if that does happen, you're going to have to go back and tell the clerk. That's what you'll have to do. Okay?
Thank you. Any questions to the other? Yes. Yes.
Selamat tengah hari, Dato. Mr. Menon, I'm Siti Hasana, SCPJ 1540. Okay, you said this now, political violence come up because of we don't come up to the standard. Tapi saya nak tanya, adakah demonstrasi adalah satu cara untuk menangani masalah ini?
Meaning?
The Bersih.
Is it the demonstration?
Is demonstration,
Yeah, is it the
violence?
way?
Yeah, violence and demonstration are different things.
But it becomes
Different things. I'll answer your question. Violence is deliberately hurting someone. Bersih has never countenanced violence. If anyone is violent in a Bersih demonstration, we have said the police must take action. Our street demonstrations away, it's a right under our federal constitution. Our constitution guarantees our right to freedom of assembly. So you are entitled to go out peacefully and communicate your views. Absolutely allowed under the Federal Constitution and now allowed with the Peaceful Assembly Act. It is allowed. Of course, they don't allow street demonstration, but they allow assemblies. So your point, sorry, whether it's a way of improving things, I believe it is. Because between elections, over the period of 5 years, when the government is ruling, what other way do you communicate your views to the government? We tried everything. Dialogue, memoranda, etc., 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 to no avail. Nothing changed. That's why we felt it necessary to have the Bersih 2 demonstration. I mean, I'm only involved in 2 and 3. The Bersih 2 demonstration. And it did bring about some change. The Parliamentary Select Committee was set up because of that. Some of the laws were amended because of that. And credit to the government. In other words, they were responding to what the Rakyat was saying. And that is a good thing. But if the government, and as I say, change is tough. Even the government is learning, we are learning. If they listen more and more to the Rakyat, there will be no need for street demonstrations or assemblies. Recently, there was, I think, a group who was protesting something outside the PKR headquarters. All that is part of the process of peaceful assembly. But the criteria is, it must be peaceful. That is not political violence. Political violence is going and frightening people either with threats or with physical violence to prevent them from attending rallies or preventing them from voting. That's political violence. That's not Bersih 2 or 3.
Thank you.
Okay, my question.
Take the mic.
Hello, Dato. Okay, my question is something like this. You know, for the reform of electoral process and all that, for the voting, the thing that we have problem right now is the phantom voters. So how do you recommend to actually reduce it, you know, not making it happen? Thank you.
You can't not make it happen altogether, not yet. We're getting there. But phantom voters is one of our worries, where in Malaysia, dead people can vote. Dead people actually do vote. So that's one of the phantom voters that we have. You see, the only way we can do something about that, or fight that, or eradicate it, is by a thorough cleaning of the electoral roll. And our EC must work well with the JPN, because EC's response is that JPN doesn't tell them this person has died and therefore they can't. That they have a system where they're connected. And what EC says is the family must come and remove the name. Now I don't think any of us do that, you know, when a family member passes away, because you assume that if JPN knows, automatically EC should know. So that system has to improve. But first, we must clean up whatever is there. And we still find evidence of that. People who are 118 years old are still registered as voters. What are the chances that they're alive? Those are stark examples which you would imagine that the Election Commission should pick up. So it probably cannot be done by the 13th general elections, the thorough cleaning up. But what they did in Bangladesh, and you should actually have a look at the report from Bangladesh, they actually called in the United Nations because they're experts in this. They cleaned up the whole electoral system. It took them a year or two. And they actually now have photographic evidence with the name. You know, electoral roll where you not only have the name and IC and so on, you also have your photograph. We could consider that. I don't know whether it'll work here. But whatever it is, we need to call in the experts to help us clean up this electoral roll. Then, from then forward, we can take the necessary steps to ensure that phantom voters are removed or reduced as far as possible.
Rosita, one more question from you.
I just want to add that the question of phantom voters, number one, I think this is the explanation given by EC in their booklet, is that once in 5 years you go back to your kampung, right? Okay, not everybody knows you in the kampung, correct? Not everybody remembers you. So people might think that you are a phantom voter because you don't go back to the kampung all the time, correct? Am I correct? Okay, number two, there are real phantom voters, alright? Okay, and it's not the EC's fault. Okay, I think it's more on the registration department's problem. Okay, to update the EC, because EC is under the constitutional law, right? Is to conduct a fair election process, correct, Dato?
Yeah. Can I ask you, do you accept that reason of the EC? As a lecturer in this college, do you accept that reason given by the Election Commission?
I would accept if it is under the law, that is their
So you do
responsibility. But it is, I would also accept that it is the Department of Registration need to upgrade and improve their system in updating the Election Commission on the death of family members, okay, so that our electoral process will run smooth. Nobody will argue this and that. All right. So the computerized system is, it's not real time. Correct, not Dato? It's not properly updated. All right. So this is not the EC's problem, but it is a problem which will make the process not 100% smooth. Correct?
Okay, I'll put it this way. Yeah? The ultimate responsibility for the electoral roll is the Election Commission's, no one else's. Okay? Standing there as people who are appointed by the King under the Federal Constitution and telling us, we cannot do anything as JPN's fault, is not good enough. You make it happen. If JPN has a problem, you go there and you help to sort it out. Under the Federal Constitution, the Election Commission has the power to get other organs of government to help them in their work. So it includes the JPN. Now, I ask you, if you're going through the electoral roll as the Election Commission and you see someone who's 118 years old, don't you think alarm bells should go off? Marab has done that exercise. They have actually shown it to the EC. They've shown it and they've said, these are problematic. EC cannot sit back and do nothing. I'm sorry, but ultimately the responsibility is theirs. The Selangor State Government recently did, end of last year I think, or in the fourth quarter of last year, did a survey. I think you all know about that. They found that out of 500,000 new voters, 28% were dubious, or they felt had problems. They wanted to raise it with the EC. The EC was not interested. You know what the EC said? It's not their job to do this. Why did the state government do this? It's not their job. That was their answer. Is that acceptable to you? Is that acceptable? Wholly unacceptable. Wholly unacceptable. And let me tell you this also. The Likas case in the year 2000 disclosed a huge number, this is Sabah, huge number of illegally entered voters. They were the foreigners who were illegally entered as voters. This is 2000. It didn't just happen with the RCI now. This information has been with us. The law students, please go and look for Likas number 1 and Likas number 2 case. You will know what I mean. And there the judge said, this is nonsense. This shouldn't be happening in our country, and EC should have done something about it. That's what the judge said. They haven't done anything about it. And there's still evidence of that happening. Now, do you know what they did? The government did after the Likas case, after the judge went through the roll, they passed a section 9A of the Election Act. 9A says, now the court cannot scrutinize the electoral roll. Right? So now that they have done that, so only the EC scrutinizes the electoral roll. So the burden on the EC is higher to ensure that the roll is clean. And unfortunately, they have kept the court out of it. And if you know, Charles Santiago recently brought an action, and that's what the court said. 9A, court cannot look into the electoral roll. So they have shut the courts out from looking at the electoral roll. So at the end of the day, to me, is unacceptable. Under the federal constitution, you can only remove an election commissioner as if you are removing a federal court judge. They have powers the same level as a federal court judge. So I do not accept the election commission saying, sorry la, we cannot do anything. Not good enough in my book.
Okay, any other questions? I'm going to take two more questions and then I'm going to bring this to a close. So wait, just a minute. I want to get those who have not. Yes, Mrs. Sandra.
What has been done for certain residents having about 60 voters registered in that house when the family says we don't know who they are. So what has Bersih done to them?
No, we can only highlight these things. As I said, we can only highlight and give it to the Election Commission. And in fact, Merak has highlighted that very, very well. There are some genuine instances when people move away, they don't change their address. That can cause that to arise. But there are many instances we found where these things have happened recently. So there's no excuse for it. But Bersih, we are the people, by the way. Bersih doesn't have any special powers that other institutions have. We only have the power of the rakyat behind us. That's very powerful though, I must admit. But we do raise it with the EC, and Merak has been raising it with the EC, and that's really what we can do. I'd like to hear questions from the students.
Yes,
actually.
I was about to say.
All right, yeah.
I'm going to take one question, and if there are more students who want to ask, I'll take
Please
more.
do, yes.
Students, any questions?
Or comments.
Or comments even, yes.
Anybody? There's one.
Yes. Stand up. Speak boldly.
Hello, my name is Salini. My question is nothing to do about the election. I just want to know about your, you did an LL.B degree, right? Can I just know your 3 years, how's your experience, and do you have any struggles, with the English?
It's a role model question. Don't know that I'm a very good role model on that score. It was, law is such a, for me, it's an experience more than a study, because it opens up your mind so much. And studying overseas, it opened up a lot of, not avenues, but it really does make you think much more than perhaps you ever did when you were in school. You need to become an adult really fast when you're studying law. You do mature very fast. And I think that's what's good about law. But I have to say that honestly, that I only really started enjoying law when I started practice. So, because that's putting what you're learning into practice. Because that's the academic side, which is very good. But for me personally, it may not be the same for you. You may be an academic. But for me personally, it was actually working with people and resolving issues for people that made the difference for me.
Last question only to students. No students ask a student.
I'm not student.
Not student? Well, let me just give me a second and I'll see if there are more. Any students want to ask questions? This is the bane of our lives. Students don't ask the right questions.
Oh, just a comment.
Comment. Okay, I'm going to give you the opportunity.
Hi. I just want to ask, considering the pace of how the EC is working right now, do you foresee a need to hold another rally to just raise even more awareness considering the pace that EC is working right now?
Thank you for the question. That's not. We have no plans to have another rally at this point. We actually thought elections were going to be announced in March, so we were ready for that. But I think the message has already got across. I think everybody knows what we've been saying. it's now time to work. It's now time for us to actually work on the ground, to educate voters about their rights. We don't tell people who to vote for. That's entirely up to each individual, and it's their right to decide who to vote for. But it's that's where we're doing our work right now, actually. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato. I'm going to reopen a question from
last question. Dato, just now you mentioned the politic violence and dirty politic. Then what Bersih can do to reduce it?
Okay, what our campaign on political violence, which we have just launched, is that we are going to keep an eye on instances of political violence, and people can report to us as well. And what we will do is that we will identify, say it happens in a constituency or an area, we will identify people who are responsible for that area, either as MPs or who may be responsible for the political violence. We will give them a chance to come out and condemn it. If they do not, then we are going to put them on a blacklist. So that's how we are handling the political violence. And we are also coming out with a code of conduct, and we're going to invite all political parties to come and discuss the code of conduct, and hopefully if all of them agree to it, then that will be another way in which we want to set the standard for the next elections. You have to remember that the Prime Minister has actually signed an ICRA, a pledge, the Transparency International Pledge, where he pledged that there will be ethical conduct in the elections. So we're hoping that once Parliament is, obviously they don't believe in ethical conduct before the elections, but when Parliament is dissolved, we hope that that's the standard that everybody will follow.
Thank you very much. And that, as you last mentioned, we all have to get back to work.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking time.